Well, living the pain in, I'll say, Northern Kentucky, District 67, I see a lot of areas that we can reduce taxes. The state has a plan with some triggers tied to it. So, with the surplus and with the controlling the budget, they could increase the trigger on the tax burden. So, also, not just reducing the tax burden, but also helping those families and those small businesses, promoting job creation and pro business policies and the infrastructure that's coming in from the new bridge. That development comes into that, I'll say, that northern pocket. And all of that is, basically having a voice in Frankfurt and also an ear here in the community allows us to grow that and improve the lives of people that are living in District 67.
It's a good question. Um, so I'm in House District 67, which is northern Campbell County. We've been very lucky here with a pretty strong legacy of very effective representatives. Rachel Roberts, who's currently in the seat and won't be running for re-election. Dennis Keene before that. And I think I look to really serve in the tradition that they've set for our district, make sure we have strong representation, to make sure we're getting our fair share of tax dollars coming back to this district. And they've been effective. Everything from the 4th Street Bridge, between Covington and Newport, redoing Route 8, those types of things have been funded. Redoing the Wilder exit, Route 9 off of 275 has been a priority of Rachel Roberts as well. And, when people do the work and your representative does the work in Frankfurt, you can see meaningful results. So that to me is what I look to do. Sure. There's a whole list, of course. It's an interesting job. Listen, I'm one of 100 representatives, so a lot of it's what you negotiate. One topic I do want to talk about specifically, it would be a very high priority for me, is housing cost and rents. Our campaign, we've knocked on about 6,000 doors already this spring and summer, going into the fall. This is the number one issue voters are bringing up. It is the number one. It is causing daily stress to our residents, to our working families. And unfortunately, our legislature, past session put in more work to criminalize homelessness than actually deal with our housing cost issue and our rents issue. I think it's an absolute moral imperative that our legislature does something about this, and it will be a very high priority for me. I think it's also something that can be a very bipartisan issue as well. We see here in Northern Kentucky, our 3 judge executives from the 3 Northern Kentucky counties have been screaming about this for a long time. The Chamber of Commerce, Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, has been talking about this issue for a long time. This to me is a high priority. It is not okay that people are losing sleep and they're constantly stressed out about how they're going to make the rent or make the mortgage payment.
Tax reform to ensure Kentucky is competitive, and then we want to increase the workforce development. That's critical because we've got a lot of great opportunities in there. Building relationships with the community, and I feel like I've got a jump on that part of it. And making sure the citizens have a voice. Being a small business owner, serving on nonprofits, I've already have that instilled in me. I'm already in the community in District 67, so I make myself available. The small business owner part of me, communicating with employees, communicating with clients, the nonprofit side of me, communicating with the families and the kids in the community through the nonprofits. Allow me to continue to do that. So yeah, that I think that's a great place to start, and then expanding from there. I believe in it. The process could create unnecessary barriers to compete in healthcare, which can drive up cost, limited access to services. It's not, I'm not going to say it's complicated, but it's time for Kentucky to really take a little closer look at that. Northern Kentucky, we can always, cross that bridge as we progress with it. But I think it's definitely something that needs to be, debated and looked at and really defined how it fits.
So when we talk about certificate of need, I think it has to be in the context of our healthcare system generally. Um, you know, Unfortunately, right now in Frankfurt, we have too many radicals that are looking to defund or dismantle Connect, which is Kentucky's affordable healthcare program. If that program is repealed, we could see 600,000 Kentuckians lose access to healthcare. People with pre-existing conditions like kids with asthma, these types of things. I mean, this is not the approach we need. And I think you have to understand Connect and the certificate of need sort of in the context of how healthcare is delivered in the state. I believe healthcare is a basic human right. I want to make sure people are able to get the services they need, the very best healthcare at an affordable price and a place that's convenient to them. I mean, nobody should ever have to, worry about how they're going to take care of their parents or their kids or themselves when they need to go to the doctor. So that's my guiding principle in all of this. And I think that's important to get out there. I've worked in healthcare for 20 years. I do know and understand the issues and challenges very well. The issues aren't so much Connect or the certificate of need, it's the middleman, like prescription benefits managers and administrative burden that is making life miserable for doctors, nurses, patients. We're talking about really harming the potential for our small independent pharmacies as well. So, to get to the CON or the certificate of need process specifically, yes, I think it could use some reform. It is a complex, detailed issue that, really does require some understanding and some nuance. But yes, there could be a robust discussion about how to improve that. But I do not believe, tearing down that system or Connect and the way we deliver healthcare in the state is a solution. It's a good question. Again, I'll start with my guiding principle. I mean, I believe every kid in this state deserves a quality, free education, or access to a free quality education. I mean, this is an American value we have held dear for a very long time. So I don't think this is controversial. And I know a strong public education system is very good for our economy. It's good for our workforce. It's good for our society, our community as well. I'm get to the point. I'm tired of, again, this kind of a radical right-wing approach that, is intending to denigrate our public school systems, denigrate our public educators. I live in Newport. I mapped it out. There are 15 15 high schools, public and private, within a 10-minute drive of where I live. We do have choice here. And if there are ways to improve choice that would allow every kid to access, the educational resources they need, I'm all for that. What I am against and why I'm voting no on Amendment 2, we don't need taxpayer money going to out-of-state for-profit charter schools, and we don't need taxpayer money going to religious institutions. I am a proud graduate of Covington Catholic High School. I appreciate the values-based education I received there. I think it set me up very well for life. But what we don't need is Campbell County's tax money, our taxpayers' dollars, going to places like Covington Catholic. They don't need it. Listen, I'd also be remiss if I don't talk a little bit about we got a lot of public schools in my district, a lot of public school districts. Newport High School is the oldest high school in the state of Kentucky. Newport was the first school district that provided free public education to Black folks, at the Southgate School in Newport. We were among the first to integrate after Brown versus Board of Education in 1955. Our valedictorian here at Newport High School just a couple of years ago got a full ride to Columbia University. He's now working in DC. We have one of the best basketball teams the last couple of years in the state. Dayton High School, which is, where John Wooden got started, the Fort Thomas Independent, among the highest performing in the state, if not the country. I just don't see what the agenda is to attack these very valuable public institutions and public schools.
I support Amendment 2, which allows parents to have more control over their children's education by ensuring that the tax dollars follow the kids. Critically, it's some school systems overperform and do great. and then there's some that underperform. And at the end of the day, trying to get that balance, it's typically the parents need that voice and involved in it, because I think the Amendment 2 is going to help with that. Now, once it's passed, if it passed, the legislators have to work on what changes the purpose of the change. So basically, I think there's like 43 states that have this already in place, and looking at them and creating the legislative piece of it that fits best for Kentucky is a necessity that, the House, and part of the reason, but I do support Amendment 2. Understanding exactly what the options are, and hearing the community and how it fits best for District 67, and representing that. Different, I'll say, communities may have different challenges in this, and that's what drives the legislation that is developed for Amendment 2. With there being said 40 plus states that have it, looking at that too, what has worked in these states and what has not worked in these states. So the molding of it and creating that legislative piece of this is critical. And that's where, once it's passed, it becomes our job to make sure that it's done correctly.
One of these, the system, the SEEK formula is not easy to get through all the time. Again, my guiding principle is to make sure all of our public schools are funded adequately and funded in a way that they're able to serve the kids and the families in the community. I think some of the concern with the SEEK formula, and probably an area I look at the most, is it does seem to be a little bit more biased towards, let's say, the administrative parts of the public school and buildings, and less towards paying the educators and paying the people who are really taking care of the kids. So if there are tweaks and reforms we can make to that, that's how I would try to prioritize. Well, I'd first start with, listen, I would support legislation that brought Kentucky back to the types of protections we had from 1973 until Roe versus Wade was overturned a couple of years ago. And any legislation that would get us closer to that, I would support. I'm frustrated that the Kentucky legislature currently they're just completely ignoring the will of the voters. We had an amendment proposal on the ballot 2 years ago, which lost pretty significantly. I mean, in my House District 67, that amendment went down by 31 points. The voters in the state, and certainly the voters in my district, have been very clear about what they want in terms of restoring and protecting access to reproductive rights. Again, the current, there's some pretty radical right wingers in our legislature, that have decided abusers and rapists are more important than allowing women and girls to have control over their own bodies. And I also don't think we need to be threatening pharmacists, doctors, nurses with felony charges, which is currently on the books, for doing the right thing for their patients. So anything that gets us to a more realistic protection for the healthcare providers and patients and women and girls to make decisions about their own bodies, I'll be behind.
Well, I believe life begins at conception, and we need to protect that part of it. However, I do support exceptions. Okay, so in case where the life of the mother is at risk, or rape, incest, that's a concern. That's something that needs to look at and needs to be part of that decision. It's not my job to play God and judge it. The challenge is basically, each situation needs to be looked at. Yes, I would support that amendment with limitations on the pardoning power. While pardoning can serve as a purpose, they should not be used recklessly to protect political allies. So yes, once again, that is something that needs to be defined correctly. And that's all part of us doing our job to make sure it's defined correctly. But yes, I do support it.
Well, look, I mean, it's unfortunate we've had a recent governor in Kentucky who clearly abused his pardon. I think that's where this discussion is from. I'd be in favor of reviewing this process to ensure those types of abuses don't happen again. I'd be reluctant to put that on a ballot amendment initiative at this point. In general, I think the governor's power to pardon, commute sentences, restore rights to those who've served their time. That's an important role of the executive branch. It's one of the checks and balances written into our Constitution. It can be important. It's an important balance, to ensure justice when, we've had situations where the legislatures have, again, criminalized homelessness. When, I think we overcriminalized marijuana offenses for a long time. I think allowing the executive branch to have that balance is important. We could have situations when prosecutors or courts become overly zealous trying to enforce unjust sentences, like when, women have had to defend themselves in cases of domestic abuse. We have this, again, we have among the most extreme abortion bans in the country on the books here in Kentucky. And if we have, I don't necessarily want to see overly zealous prosecutors going after everyone. So, I do think that balance between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch is important. I would approach any of that with extreme caution, with understanding the practical realities that it can be abused, it has been abused, and how do we prevent the abuse of that? All right. So listen, I thought you may ask this question, and I'm going to read something. This is from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce's website. Okay. Kentucky Chamber Foundation Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion serves as the conduit through which Kentucky businesses will build an inclusive and equitable commonwealth. Through partnerships with employers of all sizes and guidance from civic, education, and nonprofit leaders, the Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion aims to create deliberate, meaningful, and sustainable change to address the inequality that has long hindered Kentucky's progress. That is from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, hardly some, bleeding heart liberal organization. I don't live under a rock, okay? I know DEI has become the latest buzzword or boogeyman for, again, the radical right wing. I know the University of Kentucky has reorganized and renamed their DEI programs recently, probably likely to avoid political pressure. There are clearly cases, I'm sure somebody can find it, find them out there that, DEI programs kind of going off the rail at certain places. Some places, they just become stupid checkbox exercises for HR departments. Those aren't really effective either. But the principles that underlie well-intended DEI initiatives are important. They're good for business. They're good for the economy. They help build a more just society. Whether Frankfurt's politicians like to, quote unquote DEI or not, I mean, the principles of a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community are very much entrenched in America's most successful businesses today. So when we're competing for businesses, when we're competing to attract and retain a highly skilled workforce, it's expected that our state is embracing these. So that's where I am on that.
Yes, they need to revisit this, and this is one of them areas where you have to continue to revisit. Lawmakers should revisit restrictions on DEI programs to ensure that the taxpaying dollars are not funding the wrong areas. So that is to where if with the tax dollar, if it's the tax dollar funds it, that needs to be managed and looked at and make sure that it's done correctly, and then it's not falling short or overextending in this area. Wow, that's loaded. Housing shortage. I would reduce the burdensome regulations and streamline approving, the process, um, identifying the correct new development opportunities, encouraging private investment in affordable housing, partner with local government to identify, where it's needed, how it's needed. Once again, you get into different communities, they have different challenges. So we have to identify and understand the challenge the community is up against so we can resolve it and do it. It's become very expensive for the existing ones because the shortage and the shortfall of having enough. So, you have, whether it's families, whether it's single parents, whether it's seniors, their cost is increasing because of this shortage. And then there's also where new developments is coming in and new opportunities create other problems. But yeah, the housing shortage needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at.
Sure. And, as I mentioned before, that is probably it is the number one priority I'm hearing from voters in my district. Like I said, we've knocked about 6,000 doors, and that's what people are telling us. And as I mentioned before, it is causing enormous stress and instability for our working families on a daily basis. And I do believe it's a moral imperative, and I hope a bipartisan imperative that we'll see come together in Frankfort. As I mentioned previously, the judge executives of all three Northern Kentucky counties have clearly made this a top priority. The Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has made this a priority as well. So, for specific policy initiatives, I'm for anything and everything that's going to help the situation, whether zoning reform, finding ways to reduce the cost of development, financial assistance, tax adjustments. I intend to make this the top priority when I'm in Frankfort on behalf of my constituents, and find ways to work with both parties to find solutions. It is simply not okay that our working families and working people in this district are living with the stress every day, trying to figure out how to pay the rent or pay the mortgage. Okay, so in terms of income, Kentucky must have a competitive tax system, certainly compared to other states, and that's important. Our legislature should remain fiscally responsible. We want to keep our overall tax burden low while maintaining our ability to invest in important pro-growth initiatives. We also need to be attractive for new residents that would come to the state and for businesses to move here. So, it's interesting. I've been lucky. I live in a city and a county where my property tax rates have actually been reduced this year. I bring up property tax because I think it's important to understand our overall tax burden in the state. But both Newport School District, the Campbell County Fiscal Court have reduced property tax rates this year, and especially when, again, housing costs are going through the roof. These measures are important. Look, not everyone in Kentucky is lucky enough to live in cities and counties that have been this fiscally responsible. At the state level, though, we can't just shift our tax burden from income taxes to other types of taxes. And that's what's happened. It's government fees, consumption taxes, sales taxes, property taxes often unfairly burden the working class and middle class. And if reducing our income tax can be done without unduly increasing those types of regressive taxes, I can be for that. So if we can be fiscally responsible, that's great. My issue is, again, this year in Frankfort, they wanted to raise sales taxes during periods of very high inflation in the last couple of years. Okay, that's just adding to the cost for everyday people. And it's not reducing our overall tax burden, it's just shifting it from the richest people in Kentucky to the poor people in Kentucky. My guiding value, my principles here is to have a tax system that's equitable, that's fair. We can fund a government that provides the services we need in a responsible manner, ensures our community is safe, and that we're also able to invest in the future of our Commonwealth and not just handouts to the big business and the wealthy.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. This in a lot of ways, by eliminating that income tax and reducing the state income tax, we can make Kentucky more competitive with neighboring states. We can attract new businesses, and we can encourage the economy to grow. So, some of the existing positions that are in place, kind of set a roadmap for that to happen with some triggers that we could possibly hit and improve this. But yes, I do support it. Yes. Yeah, a little bit about what I represent and a little bit about myself. I've spent 50 years of my life, probably more than that, maybe as much as 56 years of my life in this district in Northern Campbell County. I'm running for office because I love this community. Small business owner for over 35 years. I understand the pains of small business. I understand making payroll. I understand client relations, employee relations, 750 employees. And up at one, I'll say at one time, presently not. So I get it. I understand it. Nonprofit, I serve on nonprofit boards. I'll say a large percentage of them are tied to veteran programs. I spent 5 years in the Army just out of high school. I do a lot in the community with the Bellevue Veterans Club, their youth program. I've chaired it with a lot of help and a lot of volunteers for over 25 years. And we've helped a lot of kids through that program. We've been able to grow it. We've been able to make it nice for the kids to basically grow through and be family friendly. And we need a lot more of that. And then serving on other nonprofit boards to help veterans and to help those organizations. I understand that. Those are some of the reasons. Recently, I was inducted to the Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame, and that honor was based on my community commitment and volunteering within the community since I basically left the military. And so that's great. Yeah, I spent little over 2 years, almost 3 years of my life in Europe at a very young age. I learned a lot from that experience. Northern Kentucky is got a lot of opportunities in front of them with the development. And I honestly believe, based on my background, small business owner, yeah, and I'll drive on another thing. Knights of the Columbus, I'm very involved in our church program here in Bellevue with Divine Mercy and St. Bernard's. 7 grandkids, okay, 3 daughters, and then my best friend's my wife. So, that family moral, that family support, and watching the pain that some of these families are going through, you have to decide, you got 3 challenges: pay your rent, buy food, or maybe medicine with the seniors and some of these veterans organizations. You don't have enough money to make all 3 of those. So you got to make a decision, and then there's other organizations within our community like the Brighton Center. We need to not just promote them, but support them. There was a time at the Bellevue Vets where we had too many volunteers, for carnivals and just for different things that we would do within the community. We need more volunteers. We need people stepping up and volunteering for the Brighton Center, for some of the veteran-driven things and some of these youth programs and high school support systems and church-driven systems. So the volunteers and that community connection, it's critical. It's critical that we help each other. And I honestly, that is one of many reasons that I'm running for the House of Representatives, District 67. And I'm looking forward to serving the community.